Hello friends. Welcome to Fictional Vortex. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the son of Magmoria, the lava dragon in fairy tale. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. X791 Magnolia. Naruto's chest hurt like never before. Why? Why was his heart beating like a war drum? Was it because of Aknologia's arrival, or was it something more? However, before he could ponder more on that, Naruto, a voice he thought he would never hear again, rang through his head. It's been too long, my boy. The voice said, causing Naruto to gasp in shock before he turned to look around. Magmoria, he said quietly. It must be you who defeats Zerf. But I have absolute faith that you are up to the task. The revealed Magmoria said. Naruto looked around frantically. Magmoria, how can I hear your voice? He asked as he looked around more. Lucy gulped a bit. If he was talking abo, his father, then she didn't want to piss him off. Levi quirked an eyebrow. Magmoria? She asked him, confused. Juvia shrugged. There's nobody else here, the blue-haired girl said. She then looked at Naruto. Who are you talking to? She asked him. Suddenly Naruto's stomach started to glow. Fear not, for I will deal with Aknologia. Magmoria's voice rang out to all of them, shocking those present. Glow grows to encompass Naruto's entire body as he groans in pain. Lucy's eyes widen in shock. What was going on? What was happening to Naruto, and what was that glow surrounding his body? Even the downed Laxus was being shown in the dark, and he was unconscious. Naruto gripped his stomach as a rush of memories entered his mind. Naruto was 6 when he managed to perfect his first Dragon Slayer technique. He and Magmoria celebrated by going on a hunt together and having a fun time. The next was when he and Magmoria were going over some notes on literature and culture, where Naruto was smiling at the idea of learning. A new memory flashed by his mind where he and Magmoria were just taking a day to relax and enjoy a day free of training. And then the final memory was the day he realized Magmoria had left him without any warning. With one final shout, a pillar of light shot up from Naruto's body where it began to take shape. Lucy was thrown back by a small shockwave of power where she cried out in pain. Juvia crouched over Laxus as she tried not to fall back. Levi fell on her bum and winced as the winds grew stronger and stronger. Gajiel was openly gaping at what he was watching, and he was honestly confused at what he was seeing. Magmoria's sorrow-filled voice spoke gently. I'm sorry, son, but I never did leave you. Magmoria said to him as he finally began to take form. To say Magmoria was large would be to try and tell the waves at a beach not to crash. Magmoria was absolutely humongous. The first thing they could all see clearly was a pair of dark arms reform out of the air. Next was the long winding tail that gave him incredible balance when he flew. The next thing to materialize was the dragon's broad chest and neck, showing that he was covered in dark rock scales. That was the dragon's powerful wings that gave him the ability to fly around. Finally, he was free to the world around him. Magmoria's scales were the color of burnt rocks along with the membrane of his wings. However, in certain patches like his tail, paws, and underbelly glowed with a light not unlike that from embers. His ears were fin-shaped and both the claws and teeth looked to be made out of sharpened obsidian. His eyes, however, were what drew the group of wizards' attention. Magmoria's sclera were a bright yellow while the iris glowed a ruby red, yet there was no malice in them. Naruto looked up to his father in surprise as his father spoke once more. In fact, I've been closer than you ever could have guessed. Magmoria told his son. Lucy was looking at Magmoria in shock. So this was Naruto's father. Levi had felt her jaw drop, but she just couldn't pick it up. Juvia was speechless at the sight before her, as she never would have guessed that this dragon was on their side. Gage L couldn't form words as he too was in shock at what he had just witnessed happen. A dragon had just come out of a human's body like a everyday thing was happening. The winds surrounding them died due. As Magmoria looked down at his son. Please trust that all will be explained in time. Magmoria said to him as he then looked up to the accursed dragon known as Aknologia. Magmoria growled. Right, no. I must wipe the likes of Aknologia from this world. Magmoria said as he charged the black dragon of the apocalypse. Aknologia charges a breath attack to rid the world of these pests. Today the last of the dragons would die. And nothing could stop him now. Just as Acnologia began to release his powerful breath attack, a dragon similar to Acnologia came out of nowhere and rams into Acnologia, causing the magic to shoot across the sky, lighting up the night. The members of the Fairy Tale Guild covered their eyes from the brightness, while the new dragon roared while he tried to keep Acnologia's head aimed away from the people below them. Magmoria roars out, "Fight Naruto! Fight to live!" Magmoria tells his sons as Acnologia reels back from the unseen enemy that managed to push his attack off course. Acnologia shakes his head in anger at the sight before him. A dragon dare challenges him to a fight. RRRRRAAARRRRGGGGHHHHHH. Magmoria roars at Acnologia in challenge. RRRROOOOOOOAAAAA. AAARRRRRRRRR. Acnologia roars in return as the two dragons then try to slam each other out of the way, creating massive blasts of air that cause the group of wizards' hair to blow away. A wide-eyed Juvia looks at the spectacle in shock. "I'm dreaming, I have to be," she says. Magmoria rams his head down on Acnologia as the two start to dance about in the air in a battle of death. The two dragons then spin around and head at each other before flying around a bit more. Naruto had tears in his eyes. He never thought he would see him again. He was crying for the first time in nearly 10 years since he had hurt himself falling down the volcano and scraping his knee. Tears flowing freely, he spoke. "You're back," he said, crying. To know what had caused these events to happen, one must know the beginning of the story. Our story begins nearly 20 years ago in the middle of a forest. The forest was beautiful and filled with plenty of game to feed on. However, in the middle of this forest was a long dormant volcano with one occupant. He had vowed to never train a human in his magic. However, he changed that vow when he saw how much love a mother could have for her child. This is that story. X766 Forests of Fury. A beautiful red-haired woman leapt over a fallen log, a bundle clutched to her chest. The woman's name is Kushina Uzumaki, a newly made mother. One might ask, why was she running through the woods not even 24 hours after giving birth? The answer is a tragic one. Her village had been attacked by a dark guild. Not just any dark guild, but one of the 3 pillars of the Balam Alliance, Tartarus. There was no reason, no motivation for the brutal slaughter, for what else could one call it, of her village. The village itself was small, barely 200 people, and only a fifth of them knew any magic. Herself and her husband included. She almost stumbled as she thought of her husband, Minato Namikaze. When the attack had started, nearly an hour after her son was born, Minato had grabbed the two and took them to the edge of the forest with his teleportation magic and told her to run before going back to fight the demonic guild. Tears burned her eyes as she knew, deep in her heart, that her husband was dead. As she neared the base of a mountain that lay a few miles away from where her village once stood, she came across a clearing with a few stumps of fallen trees in the center. Panting, she went over to one and sat down, gently rocking the bundle still clutched to her chest. Pulling the bundle away, it revealed a newborn baby that had rosy red cheeks adorned with 3 whisker marks apiece. A small crop of blonde hair, and if his eyes were awake, they'd show to be crystal blue. Kushina smiled sadly down at her son before giving a violent cough, flecks of blood escaping from her mouth. The reason for this was the gaping wound on her back that was inflicted on her by some shrapnel when one of the dark mages blew up a building she was near before she could flee the village. That, coupled with the hours of running and the fact she was further weakened by having recently given birth, Kushina knew her time was short, but she held on for her son's sake. Suddenly, a rumbling shook the clearing, causing Kushina to look up fearfully, thinking that on top of everything else, an earthquake was occurring. A bright light, along with the smell of sulfur and brimstone suddenly came from the other side of the clearing, and both grew stronger and stronger as the earthquakes increased in intensity. As the quakes reached their peak, the trees blocking the mountain from view suddenly caught on fire and burned to ash in a matter of seconds. Kushina could only gape in awe at the being that now stood where the trees once grew. The being was in the shape of a dragon, complete with wings, horns, claws, and fangs. Its scales, however, were the color of burnt rocks along with the membrane of its wings. However, in certain patches like the tail, paws, and ooned. Her belly glowed with a light not unlike that from embers. Its ears were fin-shaped and both the claws and teeth looked to be made out of sharpened obsidian. It was the eyes, however, that drew the dying mother's attention. The sclera were a bright yellow while the iris glowed a ruby red, yet there was no malice in them. Instead Kushina saw intelligence, wisdom, kindness, and curiosity all rolled into one. Woman. The dragon rumbled in a deep voice, indicating its gender as male. Why have you come into my domain, with a child no less? The dragon demanded. Stealing her resolve, Kushina looked the dragon in the eye and told her tale. Once she was done explaining what happened to the great beast, she gave a pained gasp as she lowered herself further onto the ground. The dragon noticed this and thought, this human is unlike any I have seen before. Not even a day since having her hatchling and she was able to run for miles to get away from a dark guild all while being mortally wounded and carrying her child no less. I rarely see such strength of spirit. It is too late. For her, however, I know no healing magic and even if I were to fly her to the nearest town, it would still take nearly an hour and by then she'd pass on. The dragon thought, I wish there was something I could do for her but, unless. It was then struck with an idea, although the last time this happened it backfired horribly. However he had a backup plan for that. Kushina, the dragon started drawing the woman's attention, having given her name during the story, I am willing to make a deal with you. While there is nothing I can do to keep you alive, I can watch over your son in your stead. The dragon spoke to her. Kushina, while looking down in despair while hearing there was nothing to be done about her imminent death, gained a renewed sense of hope while hearing the second part of the deal. But first, she needed to ask, why would you do that? She wondered. Because woman, you have impressed me in a way no human has in 400 years to keep your child safe. I can raise him and protect him. Also, when the time comes I'll teach him my magic so that when he grows up he'll be able to protect himself should he ever need to. Your time is short, so do you agree? The dragon explained. Kushina lowered her head for a moment in thought before raising her head and saying to the dragon, I accept your offer, and thank you for watching over Naruto, she said gratefully to the dragon. The dragon gave a fanged smile at this that was filled with compassion. The dragon rumbled, you're welcome. Now, is there any last words you wish to have with your son? He asked the woman. Giving a nod, Kushina looked down at the still sleeping baby in her arms before saying in an emotional voice, Yuto, don't be picky. Eat lots and grow strong. Make sure that you bathe every day and stay warm. Also, don't stay up late. You need lots of sleep. And make friends. You don't need a lot of friends. Just a few, ones you can really trust. I wasn't very good at it, but keep up with your studies and practice your magic hard, she said tearfully. Remember that everyone has strengths and weaknesses, so don't get too depressed if you can't do something all that well. Respect your elders and peers. Be extra careful about lending and borrowing money. No alcohol until you're 20, too much can ruin your health. So drink in moderation. Another thing is women. I'm a woman, so I don't know too much about this but all you need to remember is that this world is made up of men and women, so it's only natural to take an interest in girls, but just don't get hooked on bad women. Find someone just like me, Naruto. From now on, you're going to face lots of pain and hardship, she cried a bit. Be true to yourself. Have a dream and have the confidence to make that dream come true. There's so much, so much more that I want to pass on to you. I wish I could stay with you longer. I love you, she said sorrowfully before the light faded from her eyes. With that, Kushina Uzumaki passed on from this life, a content smile on her face. The dragon stood in respectful silence for a few moments before going over and gently prying the now named Naruto from his mother's arms. Then, focusing some of his magic into the ground, the dragon made a small fissure to appear as a makeshift grave where he laid Kushina to rest. He then sent out a small stream of molten magma out of his mouth to cover the grave, and he raised a large stone that the reptile carved. Here lies Kushina, a brave and loving mother. Looking down at Naruto, who slept soundly in the middle of his paw, the dragon smiled. Naruto, a nice, strong name for the son of the lava dragon, Magmoria. He mused before setting off to his home in the mountain, which was actually a dormant volcano. When he reached the base though, he looked at the newborn in his palm and frowned. This won't do. Even full-grown humans can't live in a volcano. Now, how do I fix this? He thought to himself. He then sat on his haunches, pondering his dilemma for a few minutes before a light bulb went off in his head. Yes, that'll work, he decided aloud. Lifting up his other palm, Magmoria gained a look of concentration as wisps of his magic started to gather in the outstretched hand. When the magic reached its peak, he quickly clenched his paw into a fist where a bright orange light shined briefly. Opening his hand again, a small orange lacrima lay in his palm. Carefully, he set the crystal over Naruto's sleeping form and the cries. Talized magic sank into the baby's navel like a pebble in water. Naruto twitched a little before settling back to sleep, showing the process hadn't hurt him. Magmoria gave a sigh and said, "There, now no volcano in the world can hurt you. Now, let's go see your new home Naruto, my son." With that, both baby and dragon went into the entrance of the volcano. The years would pass and Naruto would grow up to be a young child. At the age of 5, Magmoria had started to train him in lava dragon slayer magic. The boy took to learning the magic like a sponge to water, and Magmoria was proud to say the bundle of energy was his son. However, he would need to put his plan into action lest he not get another chance to save the young boy from the power of his magic and have another calamity. July 7th, X 777. Naruto was sleeping in the dormant volcano where he had lived and trained for all his life with his father Magmoria. He was supposed to have a day off, but he wanted to get a bit more training done. However, when he looked around he couldn't see his father. Okay, maybe he was outside stretching his muscles. Naruto climbed over a boulder that was in the way and began running down the trail Magmoria had carved out for him when he was little. When he reached the base of the volcano he began to sniff around for his father, but he couldn't find a scent anywhere. Where could he be? He had seen his dad last night when he had went to sleep. So he couldn't have gone far. "Dad!" Naruto called out loudly. "Dad!" He called again as he began to walk through the forest. Okay, this was starting to look bad. "Dad, where are you?" Naruto called out. Something then gained his attention. In the boulders ahead there was writing in his father's hand. "Naruto, something came up and I had to go check it out. I don't know when I'll be back. I will see you later. Magmoria," the message read. Naruto growled. "Why, Dad? Why'd you go, and why didn't you take me?" he yelled out. Why would Magmoria just suddenly leave and not take him? Surely what he was doing wasn't all that important that he left as suddenly as he did this morning. September 15th. X 777 Magnolia. A young blonde boy stood in front of the fairy tale guild, staring in both nervousness and excitement. At 11 years old, the child stood slightly taller than average but was well built for his age. Instead of scrawny, he wore orange cargo shorts, sandals, and a white t-shirt with a volcano depicted on the front. His blonde hair spiked in all directions, while his eyes were a crystal blue color that had a slit pupil. Finally, there were 3 whisker-like birthmarks on both of his cheeks. This was Naruto Kazan, Volcano, the Lava Dragon Slayer. It had been a little over 2 months since Naruto's adoptive father disappeared, and no matter how hard he searched, Naruto couldn't find him. Finally, he decided to join one of the magic guilds his father had taught him about in the hopes of getting some help in finding the elusive dragon. After going over his options, Naruto decided to join Fairy Tail. Not only was the guild known as one of the strongest in Fury, but as was well known for treating its members as family and always having a good time. Plus, Naruto had recently heard rumors that a dragon slayer had become a member. With luck, maybe he or she would know where Magmoria was. Stealing his nerves, Naruto pushed open the door of the guild and was nearly bowled over by a dust cloud caused by 2 boys brawling. The 2 looked to be around his age, if not slightly younger. One had spiky pink hair, a long scaled white scarf, a red shirt and black pants. As for the other one, he had black hair and eyes and nothing else on but a pair of boxers. What the hell? Trying to wrap his head around what he just saw, Naruto turned back to look at the inside of the guild. It was like a party was going on with groups of people talking, drinking, laughing, and occasionally fighting like the 2 boys. Despite how strange it all seemed, Naruto couldn't help but smile. This looks like it could be fun, he thought as he made his way to the bar in hopes of talking to someone in charge. Finally, when Naruto made it to the bar, he saw a little old man sitting on top of the counter. The man wore mostly orange, which made him awesome in Naruto's book, and had a bushy white mustache that matched the fringe of hair around his balding head. Currently, he just sat contentedly on top of the counter drinking from a beer mug. Clearing his throat, he spoke. Excuse me?" Naruto asked the old man, hoping to rouse him from his sleep. The old man seemed to either not hear him or was ignoring him as he continued to drink from his beer mug. Figuring he hadn't asked loud enough, Naruto took in a big breath of air and yelled as loud as he could, "Hey old man." He yelled out. That finally got a reaction out of the old-timer. The man choked on his beer and collapsed off the counter, crumpling in a heap in front of Naruto, who could only sweat drop at the display. Picking himself up, the old man dusted himself off while grumbling, "Geez, this kid's almost as loud as Natsu," to himself. He then turned to Naruto and gave the boy a smile before saying, "Well, hello there. And what can I do for you today, my boy?" he asked cheerfully. Giving a wide, yet somewhat nervous, smile, Naruto asked, "Actually, could you point me to the guild master? I'm looking into joining," he told the old man, hoping he would know where the master was. The old man just gave a pleasant nod and said, "Well, you're looking at him. I'm Makarov Dryer, and welcome to Fairy Tail," he told Naruto. A grin plastered on his face, Naruto exclaimed, "Cool. So, how do I join? Is there some sort of test or?" He trailed off, not knowing what he could say to him. Makarov just gave a wave of his hand and explained, "Oh no, nothing like that. If you sincerely want to join, then you're already a member in my eyes. Now," he continued while pulling out a stamper from his back pocket. "Where would you like your guild mark and in what color?" he asked the young boy who wanted to join the guild he called home. Surprised on how easy this was, Naruto partially lifted up his shirt sleeve and pointed at his arm just a little below the shoulder. "Here, and in orange please," he instructed the old man. Giving a nod, Makarov placed the stamper on the indicated spot, and when he removed it, the fairy tale symbol stood proudly on Naruto's arm in a bright orange color. Putting away the stamper, Makarov then spoke to the young dragon slayer. "Now my boy, could I have your name and what type of magic you use?" he asked Naruto. Shrugging, Naruto complied, "Sure thing. My name is Naruto Kazan and I use," he began to say. However, before Naruto could continue, a flying table shot out of nowhere and smashed the blonde against the bar. Slowly, Naruto pried the offending piece of furniture off of him, his eye twitching dangerously. Spying the culprits, the two boys who had been brawling earlier and had somehow fought their way right back into the guild, and were now throwing pieces of furniture at each other, some with their occupants still attached. Naruto turned to the master and gave a smile that anyone watching would say, "Holy crap." "Two," he said in a deceivingly calm voice. "Well, for my magic, how about I just show you?" he told the old man calmly for some reason. Without waiting for a reply, Naruto turned to the fighting kids and took a deep breath. He then cupped his hands around his mouth and a burnt red magic symbol formed in front of him before he shouted out, "Yo Ryu no Hoko, lava dragon's roar," he called out. With that, a roar of lava came shooting out of Naruto's mouth and it sped across the room, nailing the struggling boys who barely had time to look. Surprised before they were sent hurtling away, they flew until they crashed into the opposite wall of the guild and actually went through it, leaving two child-shaped holes, and ended up landing on the street far away from the guild. The rest of the guild could only stare in shock at the display of power that came from the young child who just sent two of their most promising members flying with just one attack. Naruto meanwhile smirked smugly before spitting into a nearby spittoon, which caught on fire from the lava loogie Naruto spat out. He then turned back towards Makarov and asked with a pleased smile on his face, "So, does that answer your question?" he asked rhetorically. Makarov could only cry a river of anime tears. "Oh, why have I been cursed with such destructive brats? That's the third time this week that wall's been broken." Still though, Makarov then gained a more serious look. "It looks like young Naruto here is a dragon slayer just like Natsu. And if that attack was any indication, he might even be slightly stronger than him. He thought to himself. The young blonde was really promising. Just then, the two boys who had been sent flying barged back in through the front door, slightly smoking from the earlier attack. "All right, who's the wise guy that attacked us?" Natsu shouted in his usually over-the-top tone. Spying the smug-looking Naruto standing by the master, Natsu came up with a hasty, if accurate, accusation. "Was it you, Blondie?" he screamed as his fist caught on fire. The pink-haired boy then went charging at Naruto, who got into a ready stance. Before he got to close, however, Natsu picked up a scent from the blonde stranger and froze, just as Naruto stiffened as well as he got a good whiff of the attacking fire mage. "Why do you smell like dragon?" they shouted simultaneously, gaining surprised looks from the surrounding wizards. After calming down a bit, Naruto asked, "So, are you the fellow dragon slayer I've heard about?" "My name's Naruto Kazan, the lava dragon slayer," he said, introducing himself to Natsu. Natsu puffed out his chest and exclaimed, "Well, I don't know if I'm the one you heard about, but I'm Natsu Dragneel, the fire dragon slayer." "Say, do you know where Igneel is?" he asked. Hearing this, Naruto slumped a little. "Is Igneel your dragon?" Naruto asked, hoping the answer was no. "Yeah, you seen him?" Natsu asked. "No." Noticing the down look on his fellow dragon slayer's face. Sighing, Naruto replied, "No, in fact I was just about to ask you if you'd seen my dad Magmoria." "Hey wait." Naruto paused, a thought striking him. "Did your dad disappear a little over 2 months ago?" he asked him in return. Gaining a surprised look at that, Natsu questioned, "Wait, did your dad disappear on July 7th as well?" Natsu asked, shocked. Nodding, Naruto struck a thinking pose. "So both dragons disappeared on the same day, what could it mean?" he asked. Natsu seemed to ponder it for a moment as well before shrugging and yelling out, "Well anyway, I still owe you for that earlier attack, so, fight me," he exclaimed loudly. He then charged with his fists being coated in flame. Naruto smirked as both his hands were coated in magma and shouting out, "Bring it," before charging as well. Seeing the ensuing fight, Gray, Elfman, Urza, and Mirajan soon joined in, and before long, the whole guild looked like one big fight club. Meanwhile, Makarov sat in a corner while bawling like a baby, a cloud of depression over his head as he thought about how much the repairs to the guild were going to cost this time. Ah, the life of a fairy tale wizard. Alright, tell me what you think and leave me a review. I originally took this challenge from Melra as an idea I always liked of trying out. However, this is my first story, so the input would be really helpful. The reason the original script and this chapter are so different is because of how short it was, so I decided to give it a bit extra length, so I hope you don't mind. Anyways, leave me a review and I'll see you later. P.S. The reason it is in paragraph form is because I didn't really like having to keep pressing enter every time someone talked, so I just kept it in paragraph form. Chapter 2. Naruto chuckled at Natsu as he tried to fight Urza, again, only for the redhead to brush him off with ease. Shaking his head at his fellow dragon slayer's antics, he then turned to face Gray, who had stripped again, and saw the ice wizard laughing at the pink-haired kid's antics as well. Natsu got up in Gray's face. "What was that Mr. walks around in his panties?" he growled at Gray. Gray scowled at Natsu. "Oh, did I strike a nerve, little matchstick?" Gray growled back at him. Naruto growled this time, "With you two idiots, either knock it off or frigging kiss already." Ted causing the two to jump back away from the other with looks of disgust on their faces. "I'm not going to kiss him," the two young boys yelled as they pointed at the other. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "Whatever helps you two sleep at night. Also gray your clothes," he said, causing the ice wizard to cry out in shock before he ran around the room to pick up his clothes. Kana, seeing this, started to laugh, as this was a common thing to see, as the ice user was an unintentional, possibly, stripper and had a habit of taking off his clothes. Naruto gave a stretch and got up. With nothing better to do, he walked over to the request board and looked at the jobs available to him. Some looked like they would pay decently, others, not so much. Ooh, there was one. Grabbing the flyer, he pulled it off the board and began to read. Help wanted. Snow wyverns have become overpopulated and their numbers need to be thinned out to keep the population moderate. Will pay 80,000 jewel to. Receiver. The flyer read. Naruto nodded to himself. This would be cool to try out. Naruto walked over to Natsu. Hey Natsu, I got a job, he said to the younger boy. Natsu jumped up. Really? What is it? He asked the lava slayer. Naruto handed him the flyer. Why don't you have a look and see? He said to the fire slayer. Natsu scrunched his eyes as he tried to read, but sadly he didn't pay that much attention to his lessons. Naruto sighed. You can't read. Can you? Naruto asked him. Natsu shook his head no slowly. No, I can't read that well. I do know the names of all kinds of foods and stuff. Things like hamburgers, spaghetti, French fries, but I never really had to pay attention when it came to reading, as Igneel was very lenient when it came to learning, Natsu said sadly. Urza, hearing that the pink-haired Dragon Slayer couldn't read, walked over. I'll help you learn, she offered. Natsu, hearing this, shook his head no quickly. No way, you're mean, he said to the redhead, getting several snickers from the other wizards around them. Urza sighed and grabbed Natsu and began dragging him off. Oh come on, I don't see what's so bad about a vocabulary lesson, she told the pink-haired kid. Natsu yelled as the redhead dragged him away. If you find Igneel, tell him I am being tortured by the Red Devil, and that he needs to come rescue me, he shouted as she walked around a corner with Natsu in tow, yelling about how he was going to be tortured. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Did he feel sorry for Natsu? Yes. Did he want to help the little punk? Hell no. Reason why? He had a job to do, so with that in mind he blonde walked out of the Guildhall towards the train station to catch the next train to the town of Ishtvan so he could get paid for taking out a few wannabe dragons. When he got to the train station, he sat down beside a young girl roughly his age with blue hair that went down her back. She smelled familiar for some reason, he just couldn't figure out why. Turning to look at her, he could see she wears a long-sleeved top with 2 buttons in the center and an ascot around her neck. The top is adorned with a small pattern around the shoulders and a small trim around the upturned cuffs. She wears a frilled skirt with a small trim running around right above the end. She also wears thigh-high socks. Other than looking normal to him, he couldn't tell what was wrong with her. So he turned back around to look for the train to see if it was coming. After waiting for roughly 20 minutes more, Naruto's acute hearing picked up the sound of an incoming train, causing him to turn. Naruto sighed. It was about time that bucket of bolts got there. When the train came to a stop, Naruto got on it and took a seat behind the blue-haired girl and waited for the train to depart. However, what he didn't expect to happen was that when the train began to move, he got sick to his stomach. Naruto's stomach suddenly dropped and he groaned. However, his thoughts were similar to this. What the hell? Why am I suddenly sick to my stomach? I've never had a problem with moving around before, so why now? He thought. The young girl turned around to face him and spoke. Are you okay? She asked him. Her response was a gurgle, and so she walked around the seat and sat next to him and placed her hand over his chest, where it glowed for several seconds before it faded. Naruto felt the sickness fade and sat up to look at the one to stop it. It was the girl from earlier. Why would she do that for him? The question must have been on his face as the girl gave a light blush. I used my magic to heal you so you wouldn't feel sick to your stomach, she said to him. Naruto could only nod before he gulped a bit. Her magic felt too familiar to him to go unnoticed. So with that he spoke. What kind of magic was that? He asked her. He had to be sure. It wouldn't be coincidence to find another dragon slayer, if she was one, so soon after finding Natsu. She got a bit nervous. I use Sky Dragon Slayer magic. What about you? What magic do you use? She asked him. Naruto's eyes had went wide. He then grinned widely. You're a dragon slayer too. That's so cool. I honestly thought me and Natsu were the only ones. But I never thought there would be another one. Much less a cute girl like you, he blurted out. Then he realized what he said and slapped his hands over his mouth. He hadn't meant to say that last part. The girl blushed red. Then she remembered what he had said. Her own eyes widened. You're a dragon slayer too. What type of dragon slayer magic do you use? Did your dragon parent leave you too? Have you seen a dragon named Grandini? She asked the questions in rapid fire. Naruto had barely kept up with her speaking, so he had to rerun all the girl's questions through his mind. Naruto nodded. Yes, I am a dragon slayer. I happen to use lava dragon slayer magic. Yes, my father left me. And sorry, but I haven't seen a dragon named Grandini, he told her as he answered her questions in the order that she asked him. That is, unless he forgot one. Wendy got a sad look in her eyes. Oh, well, sorry for bothering you, she sniffled. Naruto waved his hand. Ma, you weren't a bother. To be honest, I was just shocked that you were a dragon slayer, he told her. Wendy smiled brightly before she got a thoughtful look on her face. Hey, you said you used lava dragon slayer magic, right? She asked and got a nod from Naruto. Does that mean you can eat lava? She asked him. Naruto nodded quickly. Yep, although it tastes like burnt rock, he told her. Wendy laughed a little. So does that also mean you can also eat regular earth and fire? She asked him, this time getting a curious look on Naruto's face as well. He thought about it. Lava was basically fire mixed with earth, so it was theoretically possible. But he had never tried it before, so he wouldn't know if he could or couldn't eat the two separate elements on their own. Naruto shrugged. I don't know, never tried to eat two separate elements other than my own, he told her. Wendy nodded. It was very bad for a dragon slayer to eat an element outside their own element, as they would get sick to their stomach and wouldn't be able to move for several days. Naruto gained a curious look. So which guild do you belong to? He asked her. He didn't see a mark, but he wanted to be sure before assuming. Wendy shook her head. I'm not part of a guild. I've been looking for one to join. But they all say I'm either too young to join or not strong or smart enough, she told him. She had already visited 10 different guilds and it was always a different excuse as to why she couldn't join. Naruto grinned. Well, how about after the job I get done with, you come join Fairy Tail? It's a guild that lets anybody in. Also, it's where Natsu, he's a fire dragon slayer. Is it, so I know he'll be excited to meet you. Plus there are a lot of nice people that'll welcome you and your gift into the guild, he told Wendy. Wendy got a hopeful look on her face, showing she was excited. Really? She asked him. Naruto nodded his head. Really, he told her. Wendy nodded her head. Alright, I'll join Fairy Tail. I was actually wandering around until I found a guild that would accept me, so this actually feels nice that I have a place to go back to, she said. Naruto grinned. That's great. Naruto said as the train came to a stop. Naruto looked at the SGN and noticed that this was his stop. Well, this is where we get off. Come on, he said to the female dragon slayer. Wendy nodded her head and the two quickly got off the train and headed straight for employer to find out what they wanted exactly to happen. After finding out what they needed to know, both dragon slayers had to hike up the side of a mountain until they reached the summit. They hadn't expected to literally see nearly 100 of the darned beasts there. So in the end, Naruto smirked as he covered his fist in molten magma and then charged. Wendy shrugged and then charged after the eccentric blonde. Naruto jumped up off a rock and drew his fist back. Yoryu no Tekken, Lava Dragon's Iron Fist, Naruto shouted as he struck the white beast in the head. Wendy jumped at another and covered her legs in wind. Tenryu no Kagizume, Sky Dragon's Talon, the young girl shouted as she kicked it in the skull. Naruto saw the white beast crash to the ground and smirked. He then drew his head back to finish the beast off. Yoryu no Hoko, Lava Dragon's Roar, Naruto called out as he spat a wave of lava out of his mouth, where it quickly covered the small dragon-like creature, roasting it alive and killing it quickly. Wendy had to jump out of the way of a tail swipe from a wyvern and swiped its feet out from underneath it, causing it to crash into the ground with a loud crash. Wendy saw she was right in front of the beast's cranium and drew her own fist back. Tenryu no Hoken, Sky Dragon's Demolition Fist, she cried out as her small fist impacted against the beast. The head of wyvern exploded into a bloody mess and covered her dress in red, ruining it beyond repair. Naruto smirked when he saw Wendy take a wyvern's heads off its shoulders. However, a shadow above Wendy forced him to look up and make his eyes widen. 2 wyverns were diving at her together, intent on ending her life. Naruto summoned forth all the power he could and stomped on the ground. With a growl he called upon a technique he had been working on since he was 10 years old. Metsuri Uogi. Kakazan, Dragon Slayer's secret art. Floral Mountain, Naruto shouted out and his power poured from his body and into the ground underneath him. Suddenly the snow underneath his feet began to melt before turning into steam. Wendy, seeing and feeling, decided to get out of the way of the oncoming massacre. And it just so happened she moved out of the way just as the ground began to glow red and then a geyser of lava exploded out from under the earth. The geyser was then followed by another geyser erupting and then another. Soon a whole circle of lava geysers were erupting in a circle similar to a flower. It was both beautiful and deadly, for the wyverns. Wendy was in awe at the sight before her as she watched. The wyverns struggled to dodge the erupting magma only for several drops to burn away their wings. Wyverns were falling into the growing pool of lava left and right, and the sight of the growing pool of lava. The geysers slowly died down and smoke and ash smelling of brimstone filled the air. Naruto was standing unaffected in the center of the destruction. Wyverns were flying away from the mound. Coin they had resided on for the past half-century, wanting to stay as far away from the carnage as they could. Naruto sighed as he noticed he had done more damage than he had originally meant to do. That didn't go as well as he had hoped it would. Naruto gave a sheepish chuckle. Well, at least the wyverns are gone. He chuckled out sheepishly. This caused Wendy to giggle as well as she looked around. She then looked to the blonde. So what do we do now? She asked him. Naruto grinned. We go get paid, he said with a wide grin. Wendy agreed and she began to walk down the path. However, before she could get far, she tripped over a rock and went tumbling down the path. Naruto, being the good person he was, decided to chase after her and followed her down. Wendy reached the bottom of the path and rolled into a tree covered in moss, coming to an abrupt halt with her feet dangling above her head and eyes turned to swirls as she was so dizzy from the rolling downhill. Naruto reached her and kneeled next to her and chuckled at her. However, that chuckle turned into a yelp of horror as a pile of snow fell down on top of him, burying him completely up past his head. Then a round egg-like object fell on top of the snow pile. Naruto, who was still inside the pile of snow, growled, forcing his body temperature to heat up. The lava melted away, leaving the egg lying next to Wendy, who had finally nagged to regain her senses and sat up where the egg landed in front of her. When the snow melted, Naruto scowled at the tree, but knew he couldn't do anything as it was just a tree that did nothing but stand still until Wendy crashed into it. Naruto then looked at Wendy. You okay? He asked her. Wendy nodded her head. Yeah, I'm fine. Oh, and look what I found, she said, holding the egg up for him to see. Naruto gained a curious look in his eyes. What is that? He asked as he never saw an egg so big before in his life. Wendy shrugged. I don't know, but whatever is in it I want to see arrive, she said in an excited tone. Naruto shrugged. Well, if you want to see what comes out then you can keep it, he said, much to Wendy's silent thanks. With that, the two dragon slayers made their way to the person who had made the request to get paid. 80,000 jewel in the bag, easy peasy. After getting paid, the two made their way towards the station and boarded a train. Upon arriving in Magnolia, Naruto led Wendy, who was still carrying the large egg, to the guild hall. He smiled as he saw the place. Well, here it is. What do you think of it? He asked her. Wendy looked at it with wide eyes. It huge, how does? Oh, many people come here and move around so easily, she asked in wonder. Naruto shrugged. I don't know, but it is a guild after all, he told her as he led her to the old man. Naruto cleared his throat. Hey old man, got a new member that wants to join the guild, he said, gaining Makarov's attention, causing the man to turn and face him. Makarov smiled. Well, hello there little lady, welcome to Fairy Tale, he said to her. Wendy smiled shyly. Hi, I'm Wendy, it's nice to meet you, she said to him. Makarov chuckled. Well, do you want to join the grand adventure that is Fairy Tale? He asked her. Wendy gave an appreciative smile as she nodded her head to the old man. Makarov brought out the stamp and waved it back and forth. So where do you want it and what color would you like for it to be in? He asked the million jewel question. Wendy smiled and turned before pointing to her arm. On my arm in white, she said excitedly to the old man. Makarov complied and placed the stamp. Removing the saint, It showed a white fairy tale guild mark in all its glory. Makarov nodded his head. "Welcome to Fairy Tale," he said to her. Wendy nodded her head in thanks. However, Naruto was pulled away from his thoughts when he heard a familiar voice. "Oi Naruto, Naruto, look what I found," Natsu said as he charged in with a large white egg with blue in his hands. Naruto turned and nodded. "Wow, that's big, where'd you find it?" he asked Natsu. The pink-haired dragon slayer gave a wide grin. "I found it in the forest while blowing of some steam," he told the blonde lava user a bit too smugly. Naruto nodded his head. "So far that was 2 eggs for 2 slayers." Naruto shrugged. "Well, that's neat," he said to him. Natsu smiled wider. "I know. So how'd the job go?" he asked Naruto excitedly. Naruto grinned. "It was all right," he said before he remembered to introduce Wendy to him. His eyes widened. "Oh yeah, did I forget to mention that I found another dragon slayer," he said to Natsu, causing the pink-haired boy to nearly drop the egg he carried. There was another dragon slayer out there. However, before he could do anything, Naruto raised a hand. "And before you ask, no, she doesn't know where either Ignil or Magmoria is, as her own dragon parent Grandini left the same day our own did," he said to Natsu. "She, the dragon slayer, was a she. Well, that was not something he expected." Naruto turned and waved and over where the shy young girl walked over hesitantly. Naruto looked at Natsu. "Natsu, this is Wendy, the sky dragon slayer." "Wendy, this is Natsu, the fire dragon slayer," he said, introducing the 2 slayers to each other. Natsu shook her hand. "How's it going?" he asked her. Wendy smiled shyly. It's going good," she replied. Natsu then noticed the egg she carried. "Wow, you got a dragon egg too, that is so awesome," he said excitedly. Naruto, however, facepalmed. These things were way too small to be a dragon's egg, as they just didn't look how Magmoria described. The way Magmoria had described a dragon's egg was an egg the size of a grown man with hard scales covering the outer shell. Kinda like a actual dragon's scales would cover their own body. Naruto shook his head. "They ain't dragon eggs, as they are not only the wrong size, they lack one key thing on them," Naruto said. Listener, whom Naruto had met a few days ago along with her siblings Mirajan the Devil, the eldest, and Elfman the middle sibling, looked at Naruto with a confused look. Naruto explained some more. "A dragon's egg is an egg the size of a grown man with hard scales covering the outer shell. Kinda like a actual dragon's scales would cover their own body," he told them. They all when they heard the description of a dragon egg. Natsu sat the egg with blue markings down next to Wendy's white egg and stepped back. He then looked to Naruto. "So if they're not dragon eggs, then what are they?" he asked the blonde. Naruto, however, shrugged, as he didn't know what kind of eggs they were. Naruto scratched the back of his head. "I honestly have no clue," he said. He then clapped his hands together. "Welp, I am going to take another job. See you guys later," he said to Natsu. Gildarts, who was sitting at the bar, grinned. That kid was a workaholic. It wasn't even natural to think about. Naruto grabbed a flyer and read, "Help wanted. A fire wyvern has taken up residence in a cave near the town of Erebor and must be removed. Will pay 50,000 jewel to receiver." The paper read. Wow, wyverns sure were causing a lot of trouble these days. Naruto shrugged and left the guildhall towards the mountain range. The ride to the mountain was terrible, and he almost didn't get off, but he had finally made it. Naruto could see that the wyvern was actually bigger than the snow wyverns he and Wendy had fought earlier in the day. Nearly twice in size, to be precise. Naruto, however, seen it was sleeping and decided to end it while the job was easy. Coating his entire body in lava, Naruto leapt at the fire beast. "Yori Un. O Kenkaku, lava dragon's sword horn," Naruto called out as he impacted against the beast's skull. However, he didn't expect to bounce off the beast's head, waking it up in the process. Well, that wasn't good. The wyvern stood up and gave a loud roar that shook the cave. It then zoned in on the person that woke it from its slumber and drew its head back. Naruto was panicking. It knows magic. He screamed in his mind just as the wyvern expelled a large wave of flame from its mouth towards him. Naruto stood still as the flames washed over the lava, cloaking his body, and destroyed the cave. Naruto waited until the fire faded and drew his fist back and jumped at the wyvern. Yoryu no Hoken, Lava Dragon's breakdown fist, Naruto called out as he hit the beast in the face, causing it to skid back. Well, this sucked. It was practically immune to fire, and by extension lava, attacks, which was bad as all he knew was lava-based attacks. The wyvern roared at him before swiping its tail at him and sends him flying into a growl as he pried his body from the wall. This thing was starting to piss him off, and it would not like to see him when he was angry. Yoryu no Sekaigyo, Lava Dragon's quicklime congealing, Naruto shouted. He then spit out a thick wave of white liquid that landed on the wyvern's wings, forcing them to stick to its body, not allowing it to fly off. He then repeated the process and spat at its feet, where he effectively trapped it in place. Naruto then drew his head back to complete the finishing blow. Yoryu no Hoko, Lava Dragon's roar, Naruto called out as he spat a large wave of lava at the beast, covering it in the hot element. However, the shock of his life came when the wyvern spread its wings and gave another shout as the lava rolled off its body like water. The quicklime had melted from the lava that was poured onto it and effectively freed it from its prison. Naruto dodged a tail swipe and was forced to duck under a bite from the monster as it tried to remove his head from his body. Naruto jumped up off a rock and clasped his hands together. Yoryu no Okasho, Lava Dragon's Herculean Earth Strike, Naruto called out as he brought both hands down upon the beast's head, causing it to crash into the ground. While he was in the air, Naruto drew upon more power. Metsu Ryu Ogi, Yoshoha, Dragon Slayer's secret art. Great magma wave, Naruto yelled before he spat a large amount of molten rock out of his mouth, much hotter than any of his other techniques as the magma was white hot. The wave of earth and fire landed on the beast and it screamed in pain as it was burnt alive by the hot molten earth. Naruto landed on the ground and watched as the wyvern struggled to survive the hot lava. However, this was not a technique that used lava as hot as the earth's core. It wouldn't survive it no matter how hard it tried to survive. After watching it for several seconds, it collapsed and fell dead on the ground. With that, Naruto's job was done. He wanted to get paid and get the hell out of this place as he was in pain. Naruto was on a trail headed towards the station with his money in hand, however he failed to notice a shadow overhead. So when the thing fell on his head, he cried out in shock and dropped his money on the ground. Sitting up, he grumbled as he went to pick up his money. However, the shock of his life was when he saw the thing that landed on his head, which caused him to drop his money in the first place. It was an egg like the ones that Natsu had found in the woods, and the one Wendy had found on the job he took a few hours ago, but with black markings. Naruto shook his head and ignored it for his money and quickly gathered his bills before placing them in his pocket to focus on the egg that was in front of him. It was just as big as the ones the others found earlier. With that in mind, Naruto quickly gathered it up in his arms and got on the train that left for Magnolia. After arriving in the city of Magnolia, Naruto quickly got off the train and ran for the guild. Naruto ran into the guild hall huffing. Hey guys, look what I found while on the job, he said as he walked up to his fellow dragon slayers. Natsu and Wendy turned around and felt their eyes widen. The two ran over with wide eyes. Where'd you find this egg? Natsu asked him. Wendy nodded. Yeah, where was it? Wendy asked him. Naruto grinned. It was over in Erebor, he told them with a wide grin. This was starting to get stranger and stranger. Natsu looked at his and Wendy's eggs before looking at his fellow dragon slayers. Hey, me and Lysina built a little house for the eggs, do you want to go see it? He asked them. The two nodded and the trio quickly followed Natsu, each carrying an egg. They had to admit the house was cozy. However, their excitement didn't last as it begun to rain. Naruto looked outside. Well, this sucks, he stated. So with nothing better to do, the trio of dragon slayers lazed around the tiny hut and tried to alleviate their boredom with small games. That made them even more bored, until the rain lifted, which took hours. They had literally fell asleep during the rain and hadn't noticed the shadow. So when they woke up, they all screamed and then rushed to the guild. They had demanded, if anyone had seen the eggs. Everyone told them no, and this caused the Dragon Slayer trio to get depressed. However, Elfman came over with their eggs and explained what he had done for them. The trio thanked him and took back the eggs. Naruto looked at his egg. So any idea on what's gonna come out of them? He asked. His response was, Shrugs as the two didn't know what was inside. Naruto looked to the bar and his stomach grumbled. He was real hungry now, and after taking on such taxing jobs he could use a meal to satisfy his belly. So with that he went to get something to eat. And that's a wrap, people. Tell me what you think and leave me a nice long review of what you think of it. Until then, I'll have to catch you guys later on, so peace out everybody. Chapter 3. What's up? It is Chapter 3 and it is time for a bit of action as well as a bit of history between Naruto, Magmoria. Get back here, you flying furball of an excuse for a cat, Mira yelled as she chased the small cat that had tried to grope her rear end. Elfman was laughing. That's a real man for you. Taking what he wants but giving nothing back. He laughed. It had been 2 years since Naruto, Natsu, and Wendy had joined the guild, and so far things were doing fine. Naruto was following behind Mira, who was chasing his friend. Mira, leave him alone, he's too young. He yelled to the white-haired demon. Mira, however, opted to ignore him to chase the pervert of a cat that had groped her. For some reason it was always her that he groped and never that bimbo Urza. Mira yelled back, hell no. This cat needs to die, and he needs to die in the most painful way possible. She said as she continued to chase down the young black cat. Meliodas, as that was the cat's name, gave a laugh. Oh come on Mira, it's not like any other guy wants to date you. Besides, I thought that with the way you dressed you liked being groped, the cat said to her. However, this only made Mira more enraged. I'll skin you alive for that comment, ya hear me, ya damn cat. She roared at Meliodas. As this was going on, the other members of Fairy Tail were laughing. It was mostly true that Mira couldn't get a boyfriend and Meliodas was always groping her. Nobody knew why, it was just funny to watch. Meliodas wasn't always a pervert, he was just doing this to get his exercise in, probably. White Cat sighed. Come on Meliodas, grow up and leave Mira alone, she told her brother. Meliodas laughed. Oh come on Carla, what's wrong having a bit of fun every now and then? Meliodas laughed to the cat now named Carla. Carla shook her head at her brother's stupid antics. Happy, their other sibling, wasn't anywhere near THS annoying, so why was Meliodas acting like a fool? Brothers were so annoying she wanted to claw out their eyes, force them on their throat and then drown them just for the added measure of killing them. When Naruto managed to pry the duo apart, he had to hold Mira back with the arm so she wouldn't try to strangle the perverse cat, while Meliodas smirked in victory. Naruto looked to Meliodas. Leave her alone Meliodas, it's inappropriate to do that, he told the cat before looking at Mira, and stop trying to kill him just because you feel like it, he told the gothic girl with a scowl. Natsu laughed. It's a good thing Happy isn't like that, or else I'd die of laughter, the rosette said with a giggle. Mira looked to the fire wizard. And I'd make sure there wouldn't be a body to find alongside yours, she stated to Natsu, causing him to cower in fear of her making her threats real. At this time Makarov decided to come out and then proceeded to jump up onto the bar. He cleared his throat to gain everyone's attention. Alright everyone, it's that time of year again, the S-class trials are here, he said, making everyone cheer. Waiting for them to calm down, he chuckled. He had watched all his children grow the past 2 years and decided to wait until the right time to hold the trials. When they were done having their fun, he spoke again. This year's trials will be held at the sacred mountain, Mount Krakatoa in the Hallelujah Mountain Range. Fair warning to each of you, it's an active volcano, so if you fall in there will be no coming back, he told them. Elfman pointed to the resident lava user. Well, what about Naruto? He's manly enough to live in the stuff, the teen pointed out. Makarov nodded his head. Well, with the exception of our esteemed Naruto. Other than that it'll still apply, so be careful, he told them. Naruto raised his hand. Out of curry. Aozati, who are the S-class candidates, old man? He asked Makarov. Makarov chuckled. Well Naruto my boy, it just so happens that the candidates this year are Naruto Kazan, Wendy Marvell, Urza Scarlet, Mirajan Strauss, and finally Laxus Dryer, he said, getting some cheers. Natsu wasn't happy. Oi, what about me, old man? He yelled out at the master in outrage. Makarov turned to Natsu and shook his head. Sorry Natsu, but I haven't seen any real improvement out of you this year. Maybe you'll get a shot next time the trials come around, he told Natsu seriously. Natsu growled. What, you gotta be kidding me, old man. The rosette yelled as he shook a fist at Makarov. However, the old man shook his head. Sorry Natsu, but that's the truth, he said before turning to face the crowd once again. He clapped, his hands gaining everyone's attention. Now those who have been selected for the trials go pack some things, we leave for Krakatoa in the hour, he said to the S-class hopefuls. Naruto immediately ran out of the guildhall followed by the other S-class hopefuls and couldn't help but laugh. Miragen looked to the lava dragon slayer. What's so funny, Naruto? She asked the blonde. Naruto shook his head. Nothing really, I was just remembering one of the few good memories I had of me and my dad living in the volcano he raised me in since I was a baby, he said, trying to wave off Myra's curiosity. Wendy perked up at the thought of learning more about Naruto. Can you tell us about it? She asked with a curious-filled voice. Hey, they all knew about Natsu and her, why couldn't they know about him? It was only logical. Naruto shrugged and began to tell the story. Dad, said a soft voice as little hands gently rubbed his snout, scratching at the scales there. A rumble started deep in Magmoria's chest, settling at the back of his throat in a contented purr. Though a wise man would never call it a purr. He was indeed a dragon after all, and he had his pride as one. Dad, he repeated, his voice vibrating with Magmoria's purr as it shook his little body. He waited several moments for a response, and as he expected, he got none. His father really did hate the daytime. It's not that he wasn't a morning person. He just wasn't a daytime person, period. As such, it wasn't an easy task waking him up in the morning, but it was something that had to happen. Even if it meant he'd end up flying out the cave. Sighing to himself, he climbed off his father's snout and walked round his large body, completely slumped in resignation. This was going to hurt a lot. He even found his face involuntarily twitching in phantom pain the closer he got to his destination. It wasn't just going to hurt. It was really going to hurt. Running a hand through his long blonde hair, he stared down at the way to wake him up. To rouse the sleeping dragon. Not a good idea, but it had to be done. Gathering his courage, he reached down and took hold of his dad's tail, sucked in a deep breath, and yanked hard. Here it came. A roar shot through the cave and Magmoria's tail went whipping through the air. Unfortunately for Naruto, he was still attached to said tail and was sent sailing out the cave. A look of resignation on his face. At least until he smashed face first into a large boulder, again. The rest of his body then joining his face in impact, sending little fissures along the rock's surface before his injured body then slid down the rock, landing in a crumpled heap on the floor. There was the sound of several earth-shaking thumps before a large scaly body emerged from within the large cave inside the volcano that the two resided inside. Considered large even amongst his own kind, the dragon was an equally beautiful and majestic creature. Magmoria's body covered almost head to toe in black scales that shimmered red faintly in the morning light. The only hint in dissension of the color were the brownish scales around the claws of his hands and feet. Magmoria stared down at the fallen boy and shook his head in exasperation. Naruto, why is it every morning when I tell you to wake me up I find you incapacitated in front of that rock? He asked the blonde. No reply was given, not that he really expected one out of his adopted son, as he had literally been glued to the stone. He'd tried to tell his father several times that when he woke him, Magmoria, up, he flung him into the rock with his tail. But Magmoria refused to believe him. He wasn't a violent dragon, and there was no way he'd lose control of himself that way, even in sleep. It simply wasn't in his nature. Eventually he'd given up, trying to explain to his father that it was in fact what happened, and had just taken his morning face plant with grim resignation. Sighing in exasperation, Magmoria moved forward and nudged him with his talon, rolling him onto his back, his limbs flopping limply by his sides. Whatever he was doing, Magmoria was sure was quite exaggerated. Nothing but a dragon could incapacitate a dragon slayer in training so badly. Except perhaps a powerful mage. Given that there were no mages in the immediate vicinity and he was the only dragon there at all, he assumed his son was clearly being dramatic. After all, it wasn't he that put him in this situation, and so he should be fine. Naruto, you either wake up or I will find an ocean, drop you in the middle of it and make you swim back, he said to the young child. Actually, that's not a bad idea, he thought to himself. It would be good to test the limits of his will to go on, although it may make him angry. he finished. Naruto was never one for baths. No, please don't, he mumbled, as he struggled to a standing position. Then stop dramatizing. I will accept nothing less than 110% of your effort. As the dragon, slayer of one of the most powerful dragons, I expect nothing less than perfection, you hear? He said arrogantly, though even if said in arrogance it was true. Magmoria stood on a level above many other dragons. Knowing only one stood above him and few. But his brother Atlas Flame could stand on equal footing with he the Lava King. I understand, Dad, he said, standing up straight at his words and giving a small bow. Good. Now any idea what we will be doing today? Magmoria asked. What we have been doing for the last year, he answered. A year which had involved the pain of getting slammed into that specific rock every morning. And what have we been doing for a year? Magmoria asked his son. Naruto resisted the urge to sigh. Magmoria asked him every morning, testing his knowledge despite the fact that he knew the answer. I am to follow you around, mimicking any and all of your actions in an attempt to assimilate any and all information I can in order to become a dragon slayer that is truly equal and worthy of his master. He replied, repeating all Magmoria told him the first time, then gave another small bow at the end of the answer as he always expected. He actually wasn't entirely sure what some of those words meant, but understood the basic principle and could repeat what Magmoria told him well enough. Correct, Magmoria stated as he smirked, and now with that out the way, let us be off. He said to his son, and with that said Magmoria the Lava King flared out his wings and took off. Naruto sighed. It was really cruel of his father to continuously overlook the fact that he couldn't fly. Why couldn't he remember that one little fact? It's not as if he would try to escape the torture his father liked to call training, although the idea was extremely tempting right about now. Later that day, Naruto could do nothing but stare at the floor in complete exhaustion as he walked up the pathway to the volcanic cave. Why me? He thought to himself. Why did I have to be stuck with a dragon hell-bent on training me to death? He wondered to himself. His entire being ached due to the hellish training his father put him through. Naruto, that doesn't look at all how I walk. Magmoria roared at his dragon slayer. It reeks of defeat. Does my walk reek of defeat? Defeat. Magmoria roared out. No, Chu-san, he replied to the lava dragon. Pulling himself together, he shifted his stance, his body taking on a more predatory appearance, or at least it would if he was older than 7. Much better, he heard Magmoria rumble as he continued his walk up, using up his remaining energy to sink gracefully into his seat next to the large dragon instead of just collapsing to the ground. He didn't want Magmoria ranting about the difference between collapsing onto the ground and the way his own father sat down. They sat in companionable silence for several moments before she spoke. Naruto, I have been taking a look at your magical continuer lately and, Memoria Bega, and to say before his son interrupted him, when will you teach me that Chu-san? He interrupted the lava dragon. It sounded really useful if used in a battle. When you've learned all you need to learn, then you will know, Magmoria replied. Naruto pouted. Why'd Magmoria always have to say that? It made no sense. When you've learned all you need to learn, he mimicked his father sarcastically. Will you let me continue now? Magmoria asked. He nodded. Good. Now, as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, I've been taking a closer look at your magical container lately and something has come to my attention. Magmoria said before he paused as if unsure how to explain it to him. Naruto, what can you tell me about the different types of magic? Do you remember your lessons? He asked his son. Hi, he said, even now giving a little bow of his head as she drilled into him. Apparently Magmoria wanted constant courtesy and respect. There are several categories to magic. However, what's important to know is that any magic can be learned by anyone if they have the knowledge and power to do so. Unfortunately, it's really hard to learn even one magic and become proficient in it. Never mind more than one, which is why people specialize. Being extremely good at one is better than being just okay with a lot. Of course, getting the knowledge, as most mages don't write down the secrets to their magic, especially if it's a powerful one, which is why you normally need a good teacher. Right? He asked his father. Magmoria nodded. Mostly correct, he told the blonde. Mostly, he repeated. Look at Magmoria with watering eyes. But his father remained immune. Yes, mostly, Magmoria repeated with a nod of the head. Naruto sighed. Carry on. Then, Magmoria said. Fine. If you insist. There's the magic you inherit called innate or inborn magic. Which means that without even learning it, the magic is simply something that comes naturally to you. An innate magic that is usually showed when people unlock their magic. You did mention that most of the time it's hereditary. I think you said that elemental affinity is similar to that, he said in thought. Naruto shook his head and got back on track. Those with an affinity to a certain element will always be able to perform the magic better than others. It's something you're born with, though you did mention that if a child starts training extremely young it can be taught, though most mages don't start training young enough to do so. Which is why I'm confused about why you won't train me to get an elemental affinity, he said as he flicked a stone down the slope. Magmoria snorted. Because you're learning Dragon Slayer magic, that's why, he retorted. You also forgot to mention people like celestial mages who use holder magic, he said to the blonde. Arg, do I have to? He begged. Magmoria gave him a look. He pouted. Sighing, she decided to let it go. It wasn't relevant to what she wanted to tell him anyway, right? Well then why? Oh, you get stuff like Dragon Slayer magic, which is, what's the word for not common? Again, he asked. Rare. Magmoria supplied to the blonde. Yeah, my magic's rare. It's part of a category called Lost Magic, which is older magic of which there is little knowledge of. It isn't a magic that requires an inborn talent to use, it just requires the right teacher, knowledge and power. It's the close to the magic which is considered the origin of all other magics and where they come from, he said, getting a nod from his father. He continued, however, finding anything on the magic is obviously kind of hard to come by, he said with a smile. But, I got one big source of Dragon Slayer knowledge sitting right next to me, he said with a wide grin on his face. Cheeky brat, Magmoria growled. Ah, you're too kind, he agreed with grin. Anyway, you never let me finish. There's also forbidden magics which are forbidden for a reason. They usually cause great harm to the user and to the people around them. It can also be evil if it's a magic that requires living sacrifice, he said, and once again Magmoria nodded his head in agreement and smiled to himself. Naruto sighed. He had finished packing to go to Krakatoa. Meliodas looked to Naruto. So you want me to stay here, or do you want some company? The cat asked him as he looked at a weapons catalog. For some reason, when he wasn't behaving like a pervert, he was always looking at the daily catalog to see if there was anything inside worth buying. So far he had bought several swords and a few suits of armor for his battle form when he used it. He had one sword set Urza was obsessed with called the Dragon Blades. Each blade was legendary in their own right and were said to have been forged from the very power of the dragons whose color they took. The swords he had in order were the Sky Dragon sword with the power to heal, the Fire Dragon sword with, as you guessed, had the power of a fire dragon. Then there was the Water Dragon sword, which had large control over water and allowed for him to breathe underwater. There was the Earth Dragon sword, which allowed for Meliodas to control the earth like a second body. Then there was a completely white sword which allowed him to control light called the White Dragon's sword. There was a black sword that allowed him to control shadows called the Shadow Dragons. The last one was called the Wind Dragon sword. Now you may wonder why there are two swords that use the wind element. One was meant to heal only while the other was meant to be used offensively to fight. Naruto shook his head. I think it would be best if you stayed here. You never know, maybe you'll see more of the Dragon Blades in the catalog you want to buy, and we have plenty of jewel for you to buy 6 more, he said to the cat. Meliodas nodded. All right then. Well, I wish you the best of luck then. If you need anything, you know where I'll be, Meliodas told his best friend. Naruto nodded his head. Thanks, Meliodas. Take care, and see you when I get back, he told the cat as he flipped to another page in the catalog. With that, Naruto walked out of the apartment that he shared with the cat. He then ran to the train station and saw that everyone that was going to take the exams was there. Naturally, he was surprised to see Guildarts, as the man hadn't been to the guild in nearly 2 years for the last S-class promotion trial. Makarov looked to the Londa. All right, that appears to be everyone, the old man said. With that he then explained what trials they were going to do and how they were going to do them. They were to run up the side of the volcano with a bag of unknown goods. If they dropped the bag then they would lose a point. After that it was supposed to be one-on-one fights. Rather simple, but Naruto had grown up on a volcano, so this was like going home. Upon getting on the train, Naruto had to settle himself as it began to make its way towards the Hallelujah Mountains. The S-class trials were about to be underway. I took the idea for the dragon swords from the story Titania and the Hunter, and if you haven't read it then I urge you to do so as it is an amazing read. That's a wrap. Leave a review and I will see you later. And just to point out as a small spoiler, Acnologia will die in the Tartaros arc as I never liked how that worked. Explanation: he ripped out the souls of the dragons and turned into a dragon. I don't like this idea, so I am not having it happen. So in this story the dragons are fully alive though they are sealed inside their dragon slayers. Also before I go, I know that a large amount of you were wondering what spells Naruto would know, so here they are. Lava Dragon's Iron, Heart Breakdown, Demolition Fist, Lava Dragon's Talon. Lava Dragon's Wing Attack, Lava Dragon's Roar. Lava Dragon's Sword Horn, Lava Dragon's Crushing Fang. Lava Dragon's Magma Wall, creates a wall of magma. Lava Dragon's Quicklime Congealing, spits out quicklime where it traps a enemy. Lava Dragon's Scorching Stream Rock. Lava Dragon's Fissure Kick, kicks the ground making a fissure open and magma erupt out. Lava Dragon's Herculean Earth Strike, raises both hands overhead before clasping them together and bring them down hard. Lava Dragon's Geyser, creates a geyser of lava. Dragon Slayer's Secret Art. Ash Stone Seal, the user spews out thick ash that wraps around their target, quickly disabling their movement. By focusing solely on the target, the spellcaster can enhance the binding properties of the technique. Dragon Slayer's Secret Art. Kakazan Floral Mountain causes several geysers to erupt looking similar to a flower. Dragon Slayer's Secret Art. Great Exploding Magma Wave, spits out a wave of lava similar to the Gokamekyaku. Dragon Slayer's Secret Art. Health. Ire Remodeling Capacity, create a volcanic eruption underneath the area the spell is cast. The earth will begin to melt and the entire land mass will be completely covered in lava. P.S. I am starting a whole column of stories based on Naruto having Dragon Slayer magic. I have posted the first chapter to one of the stories called Prince of the Night, so go give it a look. Chapter 4. Hey everybody. Sorry for making you wait. But here is the latest update for Magmoria's son. 4,500 words. Naruto felt sick to his stomach the second the train begun to move. He just couldn't explain why such a thing was happening to him of all people. Used to he would never get sick on a moving vehicle, but ever since he had started growing more powerful and learned stronger techniques he had begun to feel these effects to his body. He hated this damn train already. After a solid 6.5 hours of riding the death trap called a train, he along with the other S-class hopefuls had finally arrived at the Hallelujah Mountains. And the first thing they felt was awe. The mountains themselves weren't normal mountains. Oh no, these mountains were floating in the sky like a feather did in the air. Wendy, Urza, Mirajan, Laxus and Gildarts all stared in amazement at the sight of the floating mountains, but their guild master looked on as if unimpressed by the sight of floating rocks. Clearing his throat, Urav got their attention where they all turned to the short old man. With a gesture of his hand Makarov spoke, "This, my children, is the Hallelujah Mountain Range, and as you can see they have indeed earned their name. Now these mountains are not normal as they are all held in the air by magic, but there is another thing. The lacrima designed to make sure these mountains stay afloat or low on energy. Thus the precious cargo you each have in the bags," he said with a laugh. The young teens all yelled in outrage. What the hell was this S-class examination about, making sure some dumb rocks stayed afloat or making sure they had each earned the title as a S-class wizard for the guild? Makarov raised a hand silencing them all. I know it may seem as a bit of an inconvenience to you all, but believe it or not, we are being paid to ensure that these mountains stay in the air. It is just that I have decided to see which of you have the capability to wear the title of S-class Wizard of Fairy Tale, he said with a smile on his face. This caused the kids to stop yelling where they all thought about what they had heard. First was they were being paid to do this ridiculous job. Second was they LD simultaneously earned the title of S-class Wizard while they did the job. Third was they could see how much damage they could make before they were forced to leave and then see who had earned the title of S-class wizard for the guild. There was some merit to that. Naruto cleared his throat. Alright, we can understand that this can serve as both a job and a chance to prove we are worthy of S-class. But I get the feeling that we are missing a piece of the puzzle, old-timer. He stated, getting a nod from the Sandaime master of fairy tale, showing that they were indeed missing a piece of the puzzle that had been shown to them before. You are indeed correct, Naruto. The piece of information you are lacking is thus: you will split up and be on your own with each pass of the mountains. Each path is just as dangerous as the last, so tread carefully, as one wrong step could hurt you or worse. Now at the top of these mountains is of course Mount Krakatoa. What you don't know, however, is that Mount Krakatoa is an active volcano that erupts once every 600 years. Unfortunately for us, it will erupt in 6 to 7 months. Fortunately, this is also the perfect chance to see if you have the skill to climb Mount Krakatoa and see if you can achieve the S-class wizard title for our beloved guild, he told the group. Before they could say anything, Gildarts cleared his throat and spoke. Now, Cian G is the master and I are the only S-class wizards here. We will be proctoring the exams when you reach the summit. If you reach the summit of Mount Krakatoa within a week's time, then you can see if you can have a chance to earn that S-class title that each of you desire right now. Now, while most of you are at a disadvantage, Naruto however was raised to eat the magma that sometimes flows out from under the mountain, so therefore he holds a slight advantage over each one of you in that department, as he can just eat some lava in order to regain his energy from before his task at hand, he stated calmly. Mirajan scoffed. Of course he is. I mean, why else would you choose to come to an active volcano of all things? Especially one that is due to erupt within a short time period. If you ask me, T's year's S-class placement exams was just some ploy to ensure Naruto's victory where he became the S-class, she stated. Urza shook her head. I don't think that was in the plan Master had when he had us come here. I can understand why you are upset about Naruto having such an advantage, but that doesn't mean you have to take your frustrations on him, she responded. Mira growled at her. Oh, so you already wanna have a go, don't ya? Red, she sneered as Urza pressed her own forehead against Mira's. I guess we can just have our warm-up session here down at the bottom of the mountains. I mean, we all know who is the better of us, so you might as well give up, Mira, she responded with a low growl. Naruto sighed at the two young women. It seemed that he would have to pull Urza once again. Simply put, when Naruto pulls Urza, he simply does what Urza does with Natsu and Gray every time she has to separate them. With that, he walks over to the two of them and shoves them apart, causing them to stumble. Enough, both of you. We are here to work, not fight. Well, actually we are, but that's not the point. We are being paid to ensure that these mountains don't fall, as well as see if we are qualified to be considered a S-class wizard. Besides, the two of you are 15 years old. Grow up, he said loudly, as they responded with a simultaneous mutter of understood. Makarov nodded his head in gratitude. Thank you, Naruto. Now, with that out of the way, let both the mission to ensure that the Hallelujah Mountains as well as this year's promotional exams begin, Makarov shouted. This caused the teens to cheer happily. However, Gildarts ruined the moment. A master, aren't you forgetting something? He asked, causing all celebrations to cease. Makarov cocked his head to the side. What do you mean? He asked Gildarts. The ace of fairy tale sighed. You were supposed to give each of them a map of several locations the lacrima needed to be replaced at, as well as a map of paths to take to reach the summit of the mountains, he said to his master. Makarov giggled. I know, that was the plan. Besides, the paths they need to take are marked off and will block anybody else from entering them once taken. When they are taken, they will intersect a few hundred meters down the path and they will have to fight and then replace the lacrima at the spot they fought at, he told Gildarts. Gildarts nodded his head. You know, that's not bad now that I think about it, Master. Great idea you came up with, he said, appraising Ly. Makarov laughed as he put his hands behind his head. I know, he said with a grin on his face. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.